Mike, Paul, what's up, guys?
Haven't seen you in forever.
Yeah.
It's been many hours or days.
Yeah. It was awesome last week at the Automated Shop Conference. I had a great time. Thought it was an awesome event. What was your highlights?
I thought it was very well done. I mean, it kind of, it brought me a little bit back to I got to see what my shop's going to look like in 5 years that I love about IMTS, right?
Or 5 months, if I have my say. You'll have workflows every week.
But there's so much tech that was presented that you see the value in. You may or may not be ready for it, but now that you know about it, already this week, I'm like, well, we could use that one thing. And yeah, I don't know. I always get energized by seeing what's coming, even if I'm not ready for it.
Yeah, Paul, what was your highlight?
I really enjoyed. All of it. I loved watching you win customers doing a somersault in the lobby. That was great. No, inside joke. Go check out Dave Turner's cool post. But no, something that Al at Toolpath said in his talk.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, how in previous decades, white collar jobs were kind of the valued ones, the important ones. And it's shifting now. And blue collar jobs are going to be the critical, important ones. And white collar work is going to be outsourced to AI. But you can't outsource doing machining, doing heat treating, doing plumbing, doing electrical. Yeah, the actual tactical things. Someday we'll have even more robots helping us do those things, but it'll always require people.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really cool way to think about it and just underscoring the importance of everything that this industry is all about.
Yep. I think same for me. Like you brought it back to people, and that's what I tried to do in my talk too, is connect it back to people. We're always thinking about the effectiveness of our equipment, but are people effectively being creative and using their God-given talents to think of ways to run 3, 4, 5 machines at once, or not run any machines because it's nighttime and they're sleeping, and have those machines be running without them. And it's just, I think, obviously Modern Machine Shop is the brains behind the Top Shops conference, but they're very connected. The Automated Shop conference and the Top Shops conference are very, very connected. It's very hard to be a Top Shop if you're not utilizing automation and the latest technology. So I thought it was super good.
Yeah.
And my guy did a backflip. So
he did.
He's
amazing.
You referenced this earlier, but I got a guy in the Ohio Valley region named Dave Turner, and he was like, yeah, I can do a backflip. I don't know how we were talking about our kids. And he's like, my kids think it's cool when I do a backflip. And I was like, what do you mean you can do a backflip? He's like, yeah, I could just do a backflip. I was like, then show me. So I video this guy. He just does a backflip right there in his dress shoes. And I was just thinking, man, I can't do a backflip. So Paul was like, you should do a somersault.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike, how often does an outside service provider keep you up at night?
Yeah, every day. The team's looking for updates on that. Every day we have a job that we need to know on.
How often is it heat treating?
Large majority.
Imagine if you could go log into your supplier's website, visit a client portal, and see exactly the status of your job.
Well, that would be very helpful because, typically when we're looking, it's because our customer's looking. And I don't like having to say, we'll call you back. I like to be able to just look and tell them. And when it's not in my shop, I can't do that right now.
I think honesty and transparency is something that most manufacturing leaders want to deliver to their customers. But what I love about Phoenix Heat Treat is they literally created this client portal. It's the most transparent, the most honest you can be. It says exactly where the job is, and it makes it super easy for guys like you to tell their customers what to expect.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I wish all of our outside processors had that. Nick, how do we get a hold of them?
So you go to phoenix-heat-treating.com. That's phoenix-heat-treating.com. They're serving customers all over the country.
So speaking of Modern Machine Shop, yes, they help put on that conference, and they are a sponsor of our MBA series, which we are back today talking about outside processes. I think pretty much every shop out there, there might be some that just bring in metal, cut it, and then just ship it directly to their customer. But most of them have to do some kind of outside process, a heat treat, a plating, a grinding, who knows what. And we have an expert in that today. We have Charlie Hushek. And Charlie, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. And this has been a really cool series. I've been listening along, so it's been neat. It's been educational for me too. Being on the outside process world, kind of learning what the machine shops go through. So great content, and happy to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, we're happy to have you.
And you are now on the inside too, because you just bought a machine shop.
Yeah, we did. We're really excited about it. It's we got a lot of work to do over there, but they've got really great people. Mentioned people just a minute ago, and some automation. So I think, pairing that with some culture stuff and our knowledge of outside process is going to be something special. So we're excited.
Well, one of the things Mike talked about is if you buy a company and there's not a lot of work to do, maybe you could have bought a different company and improved the valuation more by your impact as the new owner. So it's good. That's something I said in my talk too. Big gaps between where you're at and where absolute world class is a great beginning. Great acquisition target. So. Yeah.
Well, it's a great place to build value, right? I mean, fill that gap. All you're doing is building value. So
100% agree.
And Charlie, having been a previous machine shop owner and having lived the pain of not great outside process shops, and I know, Mike, you just made a knowing noise. You're probably still dealing with it today.
Every day.
I've been blown away by what you have going on at Phoenix Heat Treat and just the way that you run that business. And so would you start by giving people a bit of an intro to the business, and then we'll get into the best practices that they should be thinking about when they're sending work out to a processor like you.
Yeah, happy to help and kind of share a little bit about our story. So Phoenix Heat Treat is located in Phoenix, Arizona. It's a generational family business. Here at this location, we're in the third generation. So I'm third generation, and we started in 1963. We pretty much do almost every heat treat out there except for a few. So anything from carburizing and pH steels and aluminum and exotic processes on aluminum like uphill quenching to vacuum. We kind of cover the full gambit here. We run 24/7, 50 plus furnaces, 20 plus processes, like I like to say. So everything is here on site, which is really great. And we've just really tried to service the customer as best we can and really kind of made our vision to be the most customer-centric heat treater. And I think that creates win-wins for everybody. And that's really how we look at it. If our customers are succeeding from our service, then, we're able to kind of win along with them. And so it's been pretty cool. I'm a fifth generation heat treater myself. So my family's been doing this since 1915. There was actually a totally separate operation in Milwaukee that had 4 plants and was servicing, the wartime efforts and the industrial boom of the, Ford Motor Company and all that stuff. So, it's pretty neat. It's in our blood, I guess. And we're super excited to be able to add value to our customers and make them successful. So
awesome.
That is such cool history.
And we'll cover like the full origin story. We talked about this before we hit the record button because the history is incredible and the full story is awesome. And we'll have to cover that on another episode. But this one's more, part of the MBA series. Let's dive into how to manage outside services. And it's got me thinking about it too, because when I was at the Automated Shop Conference, one of the things I talked about is like measuring OEE or overall equipment effectiveness. So like you've got machines, are they running when they're according to the plan as much as they were supposed to be running? Are you running the cycle times you're supposed to hit? And then are those parts coming out with the quality? How many are you scrapping out of 100, for example? So, well, what that doesn't consider is like, what if it has to go out and come back? Right. And kind of, you lose a little bit of that control over your OEE metric when there's outside suppliers involved. And in many cases for machine shops, there is. I know from my experience, there's a lot of that. So,
yeah, I think, establishing, just like get all on the same page. I'm sure everybody listening can relate as Paul indicated and as you just did. But the more outside processes we have in a part, by far our risk profile on making that part goes up, right? So if it's one process or, we have some parts that have 4 or 5 outside processes. And our scrap rate will go up immensely. And it's not, there's things that we're trying to do to prevent that. It's not necessarily that the outside processor always did anything wrong either. We've had parts fall off the truck in transport, right? So it could even just be as simple as a part ended up off the truck.
We've seen that, yeah.
I know Charlie, you and I have talked about my desire to start looking at some of our outside processes and potentially, in my acquisition strategy. And it's to do exactly what Nick just said, which is to control my price, quality, and lead time, right? Because that's where my current risk is with all those parts.
Mm-hmm.
I have to tell a story because you just prompted me, and I just have to put it in here before Charlie gets into it. But like the part falling off a truck. So Charlie, you know how I connected you with Sam and we were talking about heat treating on those spindle shafts?
Yeah.
We had a long time ago, we had a guy who was delivering one to a local customer. And it was not secured in the back of the truck, and it literally like fell out of the truck onto the road. And this guy comes and like hulks it off the ground and puts it back in the truck. And then the customer's like, "What the hell is this? There's gravel in it. Like it's all stuck." This is a very precise, it's the core of a spindle in a machine tool, right?
Yeah.
And the guy ends up lying about it. And my dad said, "I was behind you on the road, so I know exactly what happened." The guy got fired. He got fired for lying, not for dropping the shaft. But yeah, my dad watched the whole thing. He's like, "I couldn't believe that guy picked it up. It was heavy as hell." So,
That's crazy.
I just had to tell that story real quick.
Oh, brutal.
Anyway, hopefully I didn't derail you from what you were saying, Charlie.
No. I mean, I think we've seen transport is a huge, risk. You guys have talked about quality and controlling your processes. And I think, when you're looking at outside processors, it's really important to kind of establish a relationship with them. One thing that, the best customers of ours is if they have a really complex part, maybe it's one that comes back and forth to heat treat 2-3 times for multiple anneals or carburized and then a machine and then a harden. I mean, there's tons of different variables. It's a harden and a nitride. Those people that have high risky parts that get their processors involved early and say, "Hey, this one's coming. Hey, this is how can we handle it?" Everything from the packaging when it leaves, we just talked about kind of parts falling off a truck, right? But, how parts arrive in egg trays, if they're just loose, could cause a problem in transit or when they get to the vendor. It doesn't matter if it's the plater or heat treater. So really establishing a good kind of rapport with your outside process, I think would be one of the first places I would start, because it's so critical to kind of setting the whole project up on the right foot, right? I think that doing a tour is always the best method, just because you get FaceTime, you can see the process, and you can really build a lot of trust or confidence in an outside vendor if you just spend, the hour visiting them, walking their process. You'll get a pretty good sense of kind of the shop they are. So I think that would be kind of, number one when you start looking at the more complex parts, is really get to know who your vendors are. And I think that makes a huge, enormous impact.
Yeah, I will double click on some of that. Treating an outside process like an afterthought is just a recipe for setting yourself up for failure, right?
Yep.
I know, just talked to, I can't remember what it was. Maybe it was another podcast of a client of ours was saying when they get, a PO for their parts from their customer, they'd immediately turn around and start issuing a PO to the vendor for outside processing, even if it's not going to happen for 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And they say, "Yeah, these parts are coming. Here's the drawing. Let's talk about racking. Let's talk about how we're going to hold them. Let's talk about packaging." And then just get very, thorough in the planning process and the communication with that vendor about making sure it's not just an afterthought. And let's egg wrap them and throw them in a box and put the drawing at the bottom of the box and and the vendor doesn't even know they show up. They don't even know about the job until it shows up on their dock, right? That's
right.
I'm sure you get that. So
yeah, we get that a lot, and I think the folks that really are in tune, they're going to let you know, hey, this job's coming. It's maybe 3 days out, so you can kind of plan accordingly. If it's we have some customers on some really regulated processing where we're doing first articles all the way through, and there's meetings with their prime, and everyone's, going over our processes into their process. Obviously, every machine shop is going to have a different level of complexity and risk, right? A bar of, H900, which is super common on, Swiss machine or something, maybe different risk than a carburized machine, copper plate, neutral hardened and solid, it goes on and on. So it's crazy how the little things, you guys talked about planning up front plays such a critical role. We'll get prints from people that just say heat treat per blueprint note 3, but then they don't include the print. So the job's coming, we're trying to run it, and now we got to stop. It gets put on hold, and we all know how that, that's a whole kind of system that in itself, and it just delays. So kind of working out, just as if you plan your machining ops, planning your outside process in that kind of contract review up front just saves an enormous amount of time down the line.
Yeah, Charlie, that example you just gave, I can't even tell you how many times we've had, some sort of non-conformance after heat treat. And then you go look at, I'll immediately start kind of digging in, like, who do we send it to? What, kind of looking at the PO. And I'll look at the PO instructions and it says heat treat per print. Hopefully we sent the print. But, we talk about internally, like, that's not enough, right? Like, I mean, why trust someone you haven't talked to interpret the print correctly?
Yeah.
And I mean, they are the professionals, but let's just go ahead and spell it out, right? Like, of course, like Paul with ProShop, I mean, like the way we can define an outside process, it's actually super simple for us to do that, but you got to take the time to do it. And then like on the planning front, we have more recently, when we've had some super complex parts, we will bring our outside processor, we'll invite them to come to our planning meeting where we're going to be talking about that job with the machinists, with the programmers, whatever, so that they can tell us like, well, hey, leave this 10th out heavy so that we can do this, or, whatever the case might be.
I think that there's some processors, and I think this is where building that relationship, the good ones are going to say, hey, this is going to move, or we've seen this grow in this area, or this is a feature that, it's a carbonizer you want to leave extra stock and grind into. Those are the ones I think that there's definitely a separation versus the guys who just throw it in a tank and go, right, or throw in a furnace and go. And everyone's got to pick what, the people they want to work with, right? I know we pride ourselves on trying to be upfront with, hey, this is going to be a challenge that you're going to face. So let's change your machining op to, simplify. And getting involved, I'll tell a story, is there's a really complex double carburized part that we do, aerospace. It has lots of copper masking. So it's a pretty high dollar part. And we helped sequence the work where they had to add one extra machining op, but it saved, I think, 12 weeks of lead time. That was going back and forth. So, customer one machined it all the way through to finish, and it required a bunch of extra plating and bunch of time involved in masking. And then, same part number by a different customer, we provide the same solution. They chose to listen, added one extra machine setup, one extra, op transit back and forth from the East Coast, and yet they saved 12 weeks. So, leveraging the knowledge of the experts, if that's in plating or heat treating or grinding, I think is such a critical piece of the puzzle. And I think that goes to, just education from a machine shop standpoint. Is heat treat is kind of like the black box, right? It just goes into this furnace. No one gets super hot. No one really knows what's going on. And you get the part, it looks the same, right? There's no dimensions that should be changing. So, finding ways to educate yourself. And there's some really great resources online or with the Metal Treating Institute to kind of educate yourself. So you have a working knowledge to kind of speak a little bit of the language with your outside processor. Goes a long, long way for sure.
Yeah,
that's really good advice.
I think, going back to what you said at the beginning, starting with a tour, and like really understanding each other's processes is such a great point. And like most people, I think, don't do that as much as they could or should. And then I think that leads into the point I was about to make, where the less you treat it like an outside process and the more you treat it as like another location of your own business, the better you're going to be. Because like, let's say you were vertically integrated, you owned a heat treating facility. Like, it would be your responsibility to make sure that your process jives with that process and that it's all one process. And so just kind of flip the script on the outside processes mindset and just think, this is part of my process and I do it via a partner instead of like, oh, I send it over there and I hope I get it back. The way I
an extension of the machining.
Yeah, exactly.
Nick, if we were taking shots every time you said process, we'd all be wasted by now. So, because you just said it like 10 times. Mike's got his bourbon in the corner. But it's such a good point, and just to dwell on that idea of depending on the parts you're making, you might be making parts that sell for $10. You might be making parts that sell for $10,000 or $100,000. But an outside process can make or break that entire value of that part. So don't treat it like an afterthought. Put that planning in, build that relationship. I know sometimes we would send donuts with our parts to some of our platers just on occasion, and we would go visit the ones that we could that were local to us. One of my Machine Shop Mastery guests talked about with their customers, they make sure to get face-to-face time with their customers quarterly. Right. Yeah. And I think it's important to get face-to-face time with your vendors because they are just as critical as your machining process to having good parts end up at your customer's dock at the end of the day.
Yeah, it doesn't go that way as much as it should. But
no, not even.
Everyone's sending donuts and like gifts and swag to their customers and their prospects. But take care of your suppliers too, especially if they make chip conveyors. Because
Nick loves donuts.
Nick needs more donuts. Yeah.
Hey, we're my customer sending me donuts, man.
Yeah.
And then just one thing about being very specific. I know we've heard stories of, send the part, the parts show up on the dock and let's be real. There are some processors that are excellent and there are some that are less than excellent. Right.
Sure.
But they're dealing with, dozens, maybe hundreds of shipments a day, trying to, keep up. Certainly in some regulated industries, there's not enough of the certified companies to even, to just have the capacity to support the needs of the industry. So, to your point, Charlie, like if you didn't send the drawing, or if it's just has very obscure kind of instructions, plate according to print, and then it's a 10-page print, right? And there's lots of details. Like you owe it to yourself and your supplier to be much more explicit. We used to always make a separate version of the drawing where we would highlight in yellow or red the things that they were responsible for, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, and then on the PO we'd say, process according to print, special highlight, pay attention to these things. But, we'd highlight the racking positions. We'd highlight all the specs. We'd highlight, masking surfaces. We'd highlight whatever. And I'm sure that just helps out the supplier so much when you have just a cascade of parts coming every day. They're doing their best to keep up. And the more you can set them up for success, the more likely the parts are going to come back right.
Exactly. I mean, so to give you guys context, I think a lot of commercial heat treaters, not many of us, so we know most of them, and they all kind of play in a similar bucket of we're just true job shops. Right now, I looked this morning, we have 530 open orders in WIP moving through all these different things. So having a system to manage it is enormous, right? So anything that you can do to streamline or set, like you said, set things up from the planning perspective. One tip or suggestion that I have for critical parts, or really just anything in general, is we save every part number and we can make a frozen fixed process. And most suppliers are going to, be able to adhere to that, especially if they're doing regulated work, aerospace, defense, medical. That takes so much of the guessing work out of it, where the print's on file, the requirements are on file, nothing's going to change without approval from everybody. That way, purchase orders can really just say, use fixed process number, blank, 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 or yada, yada. And everyone's on the same page at that point. And there's not, this question or hoping that this time they're going to get it. So, some of our best jobs that we have are these fixed processes where it just comes in and it's a lot of repeatability. And it's really great for both our customers and for us because it helps streamline that order entry and contract review. So I think taking advantage of that, situations like that where applicable makes a lot of sense for everybody.
That's a great idea. Yeah. I hadn't actually thought about having a fixed process number because, every machine shop loves that repeat work. It's the same rub as last time and just bread and butter work, just flows nicely. So the same would be true. Yeah. It's like same part, same spec, revs aren't changed. Let's lock that down with a number and they can call it out on their PO.
Yep.
You all have agreement about what that means.
So use fixed process number 1, 2, 3, and that means follow this agreed upon standard that we've used on the job before or other jobs, and then it's just clear.
So, exactly. Yeah.
Okay,
so what we'll do is like And it would be applicable for, I think, most outside processing. You could specify your racking, you could specify your fixturing, you could specify, obviously for heat treat, you're talking about times and temperatures, plating times, voltages, et cetera, whatever is applicable. So that's a known process between the customer and the OSP vendor. So that way the purchase order just says reference this part number process, or however the nomenclature everyone works out. And then, in an ideal world, you might not have to include all the prints, because depending on the level of, execution of the OSP, they may save all that stuff in an ERP, which then just simplifies the whole process. Obviously, it's not going to be applicable for a prototyping job shop, machine shop, but for folks that are doing high runs or a lot of repeatability, it can be a pretty sweet way to streamline communications. And the other nice thing is, from a quality perspective, should something happen, because things happen in heat treat, and I think we can certainly talk about, that, how to handle that. But you can make one change to this Fricks process. Instead of having parts be 1 inch apart, now you got to be 2 inches apart. You make that change one time, and you get away from the tribal knowledge of, oh, Jim on the floor knows from a corrective action that happened 4 years ago, these parts get orientated this way with 2 inch spacing. Well, no, you're just going to put it in the Fricks process. So if it's a new guy or a seasoned guy, everything is in one spot, and it becomes kind of your official record. So it's a pretty cool, helpful tool that we certainly take advantage of with customers where it makes sense. And I think others would benefit as well.
Yeah, makes sense to me. Makes complete sense. It's like, instead of the hot potato approach, where get it out of my hands, get it to you, get it back. It's like this agreed upon baton pass where you're going to make sure that you have standards for how you do it, so that you don't slow down, but it's very clear, we're not going to drop this and lose the race for that reason.
Right.
Paul, tell me about your trip to Italy.
I went there with the NTMA, and we got to tour SMW Autoblock, 2 different facilities. Absolutely blew me away. World-class, enormous places. I can't even count how many machines there were, but so much automation. One of the most incredible takeaways for me was the breadth of what they made. I did not know they made so many work holding products and automation products. And I loved watching a big chuck machine a little chuck. So they were machining chucks in huge lathes. I thought that was super fun.
Yeah, you introduced them to me after you came back, and they've been to my shop, and the ideas they have to breathe new life into some of my machines and the tools and the jobs that we're running was just shocking.
And then one of the coolest things is we're bringing this new automated pallet delivery system, the Hennig workflow, to market. And guess what the interface is? It's SMW 0-point locators. It's really sweet.
We're getting ready to get some of those. So
how do people find SMW Autoblock to look through that massive catalog of products?
It's smwautoblock.com.
Yeah, get rid of that C. smwautoblock.com. I see some gears turning. Paul, do you guys have anything where it's because you mentioned ERP, where it's okay, we can agree on this process with an outside vendor? I know you have some stuff in ProShop for outside vendor management.
We have, first of all, we have what we call our outside processing approved prints. So you can have a variant of the drawing linked to that outside process with special markups and highlights or whatever, flag notes that you have, customized for that vendor to really set them up for the most success. Right. And as part of the spec that you're, typically people would put in a mil spec or whatever the spec is from an ASTM spec or from their customer. But you certainly could go a little bit further just with your vendor and say, all right, here's the exact situation, everything that we need. You call it this, we're going to call it that as well. And we'll put it right in the spec that flows automatically to the vendor PO. So every time that comes, assuming there's no rev change to your, to the machine shop's drawing, it just flows automatically. They get the correct print, they get the correct spec, and everyone is on the same page about exactly what that means.
Yeah, awesome.
One thing that I might add, kind of because we're talking about now the logistics of kind of sending work, is having a really good kind of visual inspection going out to the OSP and then a really good incoming. Obviously, handling is one of the biggest challenges any OSP vendor, the amount of emails I've gotten on handling and how do you handle and XYZ. And there's been lots of disputes over the years, I think is a fair assessment. And I think any machine shop is probably, nodding their head, but where it's who nicked, who dinged it, who's at fault, who's liable. So taking control of, hey, this is how we went out. Here's how they came back, and doing the incoming inspection in a reasonable amount of time. If that's, hey, we're going to Rockwell hardness a few parts, we're going to do a visual, but doing it within, a week is definitely preferred. I think I speak for all outside vendors when you say, we don't want to get an email 6 months. I've got an email a year and a half later saying there's a Rockwell issue. It's like, well, where have the parts been? How do I know these things even, where were these, like traceability questions, right? So just being on top of that receiving inspection, I think plays a huge role and can make or break, that relationship like we talked about earlier.
Where is the statute of limitations?
I don't know, because I get those same emails.
Like, is it 10 years? Like, all right.
I don't know.
Yeah, Mike, you told a story recently where you had a customer reach out like a year plus later and said, yeah, these parts are rusty.
Right.
You're like, they weren't rusty when we shipped them to you.
A year ago, they were not rusty.
We've gotten that too, where we shipped a bunch of conveyors for storage to be paired with machines later. They left them in a warehouse for a year, and then they were complaining about rust. It's like, you want to sell more machines
throughout the process to just to prevent that. Like, we'll take a picture of it going out. This is how they were packaged. This is how they all looked, the finish after blast cleaning or whatever. So if you come back to me in a year and they're rusty, I'm like, dude, here's a picture of how they left our place, right? But that gives confidence to our customers. So,
well, and I think there's even a simpler level of that I think we probably face more often than damage in an outside process is just a count. Yep. We think we made 50. We think we shipped 50. They come back and we have 48.
Yep.
And it's who are you most confident knows how to count? Right?
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Did we send out 50? Did we not? I mean, I hope our outgoing and incoming inspection would have caught that we didn't.
We're not talking about the donuts, right? Because it's the guy with frosting all over his face. It's like, Gary, come on, man. We were supposed to send 50 to the supplier.
Yeah. But what happens inevitably in that conversation is we call the outside processors like, hey, we only got 48 of these back. Well, their response immediately is, well, we ran everything you sent us.
Right.
And, and then you're saying, well, we sent you a packing slip with 50 on it and you signed for it.
Right.
But then on the flip side, if we didn't do our job at receiving inspection, you sent us back one that says 50 and we signed for it and we counted it 3 days later. Right.
Sure.
So where'd they go?
Yeah.
And then typically we end up holding the bag on that, it seems like. But
counting's a challenge because everyone's trying to do this, get through parts as quickly as possible, right? It's usually late by the time it gets to heat treat. And so we're plating or everyone's under the gun if something didn't go right upstream. And so time is of the essence. And so, we've had that issue. That's why we'll take pictures of parts. Obviously if they're softball size or shoe ball, you can see them pretty easily and do a good count. If you're talking about 1,000 Swiss screw, Swiss machine parts that are sitting in a basket, that's impossible to count. You're doing weight. But we have that challenge as well. And it really does become whose time and attention to detail. And, it's a challenge for sure. That's why I like egg trays or totes with containers that you can easily say there's 10 parts in this tote or there's 30 parts in this egg tray. Helps make the counting easier.
We have, this isn't directly related. I mean, it is kind of related, but it was just one of my first exposures to like a count being off from outside process. But we were supposed to get back, we'll say 50 parts, and we got back 48. We know we sent 50, and you call them, they're like, and they were small parts, and it was some sort of plating or something. I can't remember, maybe a copper plating. And they're, we ask them about it, like, they may have fallen out in the bin. We clean that once every 3 months, so we'll let you know if we find them. It's like, it's not going to do me good in 3 months. They're due next week,
And they'll be an inch thicker with many, many thousands of platings stacked on top of each other.
You could get more copper scrap money for them.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Charlie, I love your point about outgoing and incoming inspection. Quite honestly, when you look at a typical shop router that has an outside process, very often those are not on the router. Like they're kind of unspoken things that should be happening, but it's not explicitly laid out about what exactly does this mean to have an outside process and an incoming process, inspection process. And years ago, when we were first, building ProShop and coding it, we made it such that if you added an outside process to your routing, it automatically added an incoming inspection and an outgoing inspection on either side of that, along with the shipping operation. So like every ProShop customer knows, if you have an outside process, there's 4 operations automatically for that. Yeah. There's an outgoing inspection, there's the shipping itself, there's the process, there's the incoming inspection. And you can explicitly identify and have like an inspection criteria for each of those steps. So you could have, a double count, for an outside, and take pictures of it when it went, and have explicit packaging requirements, and do some sample inspection on the key feature or whatever it might be. And then the same thing when it comes back in, check, if it's plating, check the threads for gunk in them, check, hopefully heat treating, check the hardness. Yeah. And do it within a day. Don't wait even a week. Right. Not everyone has the luxury of
do
moving
those
things that
pictures
quickly.
Stay with it forever then, Paul? So you can check back when Charlie's customer calls back 10 years later and says that the rock goes off.
if a photo is a requirement, which you can set, then you have to attach a photo, and it's there forever on that work order.
Yeah, I love that.
And we're going to do the same at the machine shop, because a photo is worth 1,000 words, right? And having that official record, but it just drives accountability, right? If it's this tribal knowledge thing, it's like, oh yeah, Jim, I guess it's supposed to do this, visual inspection on the incoming, but it's not a signed off stamped operation. There's something about putting your name behind it or putting your badge number in that drives that behavior. Mm-hmm. And it's not to play gotcha, but it just builds a strong process, right? It builds something that you can have repeatability in. And so to your point, our system that we're building will have kind of an outgoing, outside process, incoming with required fields that are entered. So we're right there with you. So it's key.
Yeah. And if the parts are valuable enough, take a picture of every single one, or both the top and the bottom of every single one. Right. So I'd love to maybe move to when something does go wrong, and every shop is like, oh, the plater should pay for it. And the plater's like, we're only responsible for the value of what we do. Like, maybe just talk a little bit about how to navigate those things.
Yeah. From a heat treat's perspective, it's interesting, right? A lot shows up at heat treat that you don't really know. It could be coming from the mill, where there's an inclusion in the core of the material, and you quench it and it cracks. You could take too rough or too aggressive a cut, and you see distortion. And then obviously there's, challenges with heat treat. Things don't quench properly or whatever it might be. So when inevitably something does happen, the best customers we have are the ones that approach it with okay, how can we work through this together? Let's catch our breath. Everyone's, usually you got a lot of money into it. So let's catch a beat and figure out, okay, what's going on here? What happened? Maybe on site, just to collaborate together. And that partnership, I think, is critical. The customers that come at you just guns a-blazing are never, those are the ones that, you're going to maybe filter to the bottom of the list of priorities, versus the guys that are like, hey, how can we solve this one together and work through it? The value thing is challenging, right? Every outside vendor is going to take a different approach. The Metal Treating Institute has a limited liability clause that, is usually company's most heat treaters. So it is 2 times the cost of processing, because a lot of times the processor doesn't know the true value of the part, right? And I think that makes it really hard. There's no insurance. So we don't know if that part is $5 or $50,000, right? And if I knew it was $50,000, I would probably handle each one, with a cradle and, be super extra meticulous. But with the volume of work, that's just not typically how people are sharing. Hey, this part's a $50,000 part. So when it comes to solving those problems, I think there is a level of it's a give and take, a dance. The outside processors, probably going to, flex when they need to flex their muscles, or, bend when they need to bend, and say, hey, we're in this thing together. It's a true partnership, and this is how we can kind of split the cost here, or we're going to cover the material, or we'll cover the heat treat, we'll issue a credit. Most of the times, heat treaters or platers, I'm assuming are similar boat, are going to issue a credit for future work. And that goes on your counter, clears any outstanding bills. And so that's typically how we would approach it, is you're looking at the situation. If it's lost parts, okay, do we have pictures? Who's really at fault here? What's the true cost of the material that you have into it? And then you kind of work through this relationship. And I think it goes to what we talked at the very beginning. If you have a really good relationship with your vendor, you're probably going to get more money if there's an issue that comes up. If you're the guy who throws a hot potato, like Nick said, and you guys take it, and I'm going to beat you up on lead time, I'm going to beat you up on price every time, you're probably going to get the flex and say, hey, well, this is kind of our stance on limited liability. And it's a tough call and someone's losing. So the best shops are going to find win-wins, obviously, to kind of preserve relationships and continue business together. But yeah, it's not fun when those situations happen. So really just approaching it as a partnership, as if it was something internal. How would you kind of work through it and be the baton and an extension of your processing, right? So
it's such a great point to bring up too, because I know, we've faced it many, many times where, I think in general, I think for a lot of us, our outside process might be our last process, right? So we've bought the material, we've, maybe gone through days, if not weeks of machining, and then we send it off and it comes back bad. It's hard. I like how you said, just like take a breath, because sometimes you do want to just immediately call and go, what the hell did you do to my part that was perfectly fine when it left here?
Yeah.
And now it's not. And it's, that is a gut reaction for sure. Maybe not the right one, but it's
a logical gut reaction, right? Yeah. You got a lot of money and resources tied into it. So,
right.
And I think everyone feels that when you pick up the phone, when any machine shop calls and is frustrated. It does make it hard for anybody to be like, okay, how do we work through this together if you're just getting chewed out, on the phone. So taking a minute, as difficult as that might be to work through it, tends to be those tend to move the fastest. So,
Charlie, one other, I think we're probably close to wrapping up, but one other question I know that we struggle with most of our outside processing is all the way back on the front end of this process when I'm quoting a job and, it's got 1, 2, 5 outside processes. We can generally quote the part of the process that we do, within hours if we need to. But sometimes we get stuck waiting days, maybe a week to get outside processing. And in the meantime, maybe we've lost the opportunity because 6 other people replied. Do you have any tips on how we could, how machine shops could work to get those responses back quicker? And what can we do on our end to make it easier for our outside processors?
Right.
Send donuts.
Send donuts.
Send donuts.
For us, for us, I think it's, we quote usually based on a part weight. So because that's going to determine how many parts what furnace we can run it in, obviously you need the geometry. It's a huge part of that, but you want to know if it's 50 pounds, how many parts am I going to get in a load type thing. So I think it's really starts with talking to your supplier and say, hey, what information do you need right out of the bat? You'd be surprised how many customers we do quotes with and they still don't provide the unit weight. And so we ask them every time. And then it's just back and forth, this dance that could have been just avoided if our customers knew, okay, they're always going to need the part weight. They're always going to need the max dimensions. They're always going to need the spec. They're always going to need the requirements, X, Y, Z. I think that plays a big factor. And then just being clear with, hey, I'm going to need straightness. This is a bar. It can't come back like a banana. Or, yeah, I can. I'm going to chop it up into a million pieces. So straightness doesn't have to be. It's like trying to kind of be as explicit on the quote as possible is important. And I think that's a big defining factor for a healthy outside processor is how quickly they can return quotes. I think that's a good kind of indicator when you're vetting or looking at who to send your work to. So definitely get involved and talk to them early what they need, because everyone's going to be a little different. Some people will just run on minimums and a price per pound, and that's super easy to kind of quote. Some people do it by part number specific. And so really understanding what your vendor needs and then flowing that information down appropriately goes a long way.
Yeah, I think I've just got this parallel of like hot potato versus a baton pass in my head. And like the point of hot potato is to get it out of your hands and not lose. It's like one person wins, one person loses. And the point of a baton pass is to like win as a team. And so you practice how you're going to do it. Is it going to come to my right hand or my left hand or however? And then if it's different every time, it's going to slow you down. And so just like watch Olympic racing and you see how they do it, and it's very practiced. And so why don't we do that same type of approach with our OSPs?
But have you seen Olympic hot potato? I
mean, no, but I think we got to get that in.
It's an up-and-coming sport.
It's fun too.
That's a great point, Nick. And Charlie, the points you brought up are so relevant, right? If it's a plating process, and you have the 3D model, send the surface area along with it, or send the bounding box, or whatever it might be that could be useful. But having that open communication between the vendor and yourself as to what they need to set the whole team up for success is a great conversation to have. And then I was joking only a little bit about the donuts. Like if a plating shop has, or a heat treat shop has 100 quotes to get to. And some of the companies that are sending it are ones where they have a personal relationship and they've been there and they visited and they send donuts and they've just invested in their relationship, versus the ones that come guns a-blazing every time there's an issue and they send you parts without a PO in advance and they just don't communicate. Like which one are you going to prioritize, right? If as a shop you want that team success, which is ultimately your success to your customer, you got to invest in that relationship with those processors.
Yeah, if this was a drinking game, the two words that would get us the most messed up was process and relationship. And like the relationship is a process too. Think about your most important relationships in your life. Like you look back and it's what you did during the hard times that like really galvanized the relationship, especially if you're married. Not that we have any hard times, I'm a perfect husband, but
she doesn't listen, Nick. She's not.
I hear from like my own customers all the time, like we expect things to go well, and then when they don't, it's how we respond. That give and take of like usually just like in relationships, it's not 100% the fault one way and 0 the other. So there's some sort of like, okay, I got to own the 20% of this, and what do we do most importantly moving forward to make sure that we don't have another issue next time. So,
Hey, Metalworking Nation, Paul here. The countdown is on for Top Shops 2025, and I want you to be there. It's happening on November 11th and 12th in Charlotte, North Carolina at the NASCAR Hall of Fame. The best of the best in the machining industry will be all in one place, sharing strategies, best practices, and leveling up together. And optionally, come in the afternoon of the 10th to visit Roush Yates Manufacturing Solutions and see one of the most incredible machine shops in the world. If you've seen my videos of their shop, you know how amazing it is. That tour alone is worth the price of admission. Nick, Mike, and I will all be there, and we want you in the room with us. Registration is officially open, and the team at Top Shops has graciously offered listeners of Making Chips 20% off the registration price. That's $200 or more off with code MAK20. So go to topshopsevent.com, grab your spot now, and I hope to see you there.
I love Nick's analogy early on. I mean, we call it is outside processing, but I like the idea that we quit calling it outside processing and just think of it as you're just sending it over to your other division or whatever. And, we plan out everything we do internally, hopefully to a very fine detail. And then, sometimes we just throw it over the fence, like, here, heat treat this. And then we're shocked when it didn't work out right.
Yeah, it makes a big difference, right? Having a good relationship, you can save weeks on lead time. You can sequence work better if it's a good processor and, eliminate the risk. I think that's, what we talk about, especially in regulated industries, really anything. You want to control that risk as best you can. And I think you could do a whole episode on, vertical integration too, and when that makes sense and when it doesn't. And, there's pros and cons to that and, type of work you do. So I think, it's a critical process to the success of, delivering parts to your customer. So,
Charlie, there was 3 shots in that last sentence, 2 processes and 1 relationship. So do not play along. We are not recommending that you play along at home. But speaking of full episodes, I can't wait to do one where we tell the whole story of the business and, you gave us a little bit of it, and you really went through the fire. And then I came up with a great title for the episode because it's heat treating. But can't wait to tell that. And then we'll talk more about like what you just said with vertical integration. We have a lot more to cover with you guys and with Phoenix. So tell our audience how they can find you, and if they're in need of a better solution in that area, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, for sure. Getting a hold of me directly is best on LinkedIn. If you have a quote or heat treating questions, you can find us, at Phoenix Heat Treat. It's like phoenix-heat-treating.com. But yeah, we're happy to help. We have degreed metallurgists on staff to help kind of answer engineering questions and be a resource for sequencing work, and really be that relay race baton, next stage in the baton relay race. So
yeah, awesome. Well, if you treat your outside processes like a different company, you're not making chips.
And if you're not making chips,
you're not making money.
Bam.
Hey, Charlie, what's up, man?
How's it going, buddy?
Plugging away.
What's new with the Hushek family? You've got some news, huh?
Yeah, we just bought a machine shop. It's been crazy. It's been fun, though.
So all
Bold
of this
move.
talk,
I like it.
Yeah, all of this talk that you've had with me, Paul, and Mike about, okay, how do you make sure there's a smooth transition from the machine shop to the outside processors, like heat treating partners, and now you have a new empathy, a new intimate understanding on both sides. Pretty awesome.
Oh my gosh, the technical side is like drinking through a fire hose. But I think, the biggest thing I've picked up on already is just that communication between the machine shop and the heat treat vendor just makes the world of difference. You can really speed up processing and save a ton of time. It's been amazing. So
what are some of the biggest mistakes that can be made, like doing it the wrong way, not communicating, or like little details that could be left out?
You just kind of throw it over the fence, right? You think that it makes sense to you, but when it gets to somebody else, they're like, I have no idea what's going on here. You're missing the print, you're missing call outs, specs and revs aren't up to date. Those little things create that paperwork headache down the road. So like just having smooth transition, knowing what's expected from the heat treat processor makes a ton of difference.
So what would you say would be sort of if people were putting together like a top 5 list of the most important things a machine shop can do to be a great partner to an outside processor or heat treater, what would you say would be on that list?
Yeah, I think letting people know that a hot job is coming, because throwing it over the fence doesn't help, so communicate, bring them in early. I think making sure that all your requirements are clearly identified, so you're not missing prints. You have your material listed, you have the condition. And then if you're able to educate yourself a little bit on what the process is, that helps speed everything along. So you're talking the same language. And if that's not an option, then just get your heat treater involved early and at the bid process and make sure that everything runs smooth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we talked about the difference between a baton pass and a hot potato in one of the episodes we recorded together. And like hot potato, like get it out of my hands and get it into your hands as quick as possible. And like hopefully it comes back and I win, And
that's right.
It's the opposite. And one thing that you mentioned that I thought was great and worth reiterating is spending a few hours or half a day or a full day in each other's shoes, which of course you've done now that you've just acquired a machine shop on the other side of the aisle. But, actually doing a full tour and understanding the process and not thinking of it as a different company and this hot potato thing, but this is just like one team, one unified team. And I think
you want to establish that, set up that strong relationship, and it starts with, I think, just in person. Obviously, if that's not always an option, walking through stuff on Zoom or call or is a nice second place. But if you can get to a shop, especially a heat treat shop or your plating shop, to really understand and walk the flow, walk the process, man, that just opens up such a better line of communication, and that really is the key for that smooth baton handoff.
Yeah, for sure.
So, Charlie, I'm also curious to ask, when you talk about documentation, do you prefer to have really thorough documentation on the purchase order itself, or the purchase order just say, heat treat per the drawing, and make sure the drawing is really clear with highlights and markups, or both?
Yeah, for us, if you reference the purchase order is going to be your main contract, right? So as much detail as you can put on there is beneficial. The print becomes supplement. Obviously, you're going to need both to understand geometry, but what's tricky is sometimes you may not get the final part in its net shape. It might be a bar, so the print isn't as critical. So putting as much detail on that purchase order, if it's special racking instructions, high risk, handling, that is really going to be what drives the agreement or sets everything up. So it sets the stage for success. So I prefer to have everything, all the detail listed on what's required on the cert is a big one that we get times that's omitted from the purchase order, and then it creates issues down the line. So just put it all up front, and it kind of sets the stage.
That's great advice.
So your machining strategies and your machining process can affect the heat treater, and then your vice versa. The heat treating process and the way you do your heat treating can affect the machining side of it. So how important is it to understand, how those two different processes can affect each other and change one another?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, material it has a mind of its own. It's sometimes it's predictable, sometimes it's not. But when you're trying to be really aggressive on cycle times and you make these big cuts from one side, that induces a lot of stress in the material. And you might see that down the road when it goes into heat treat and you get your parts back that look like a banana. So I think if you have a part that, you're trying to, is super critical, getting with that processor and kind of tailoring your machining approach to understand, I got to take a little bit from both sides, or I got to make smaller cuts, or I got to slow the speeds and feeds down, that will save you a lot in the downstream, right? Because you're not putting as much stress into the part. So there's tons of different ways to kind of attacking it. And I think that it all goes back to how critical the part is. You're going to put how risky the part is dictates how much time you're going to put into it up front. On that engineering side, the more risky, the more high dollar it is to machine. I'd be right there with your heat treater, your outside process, making sure you're driving success.
Cool. Yeah, as we wrap up this little segment, you talk a lot about communication. I think that's the one thing that's kind of essential to all of what we talk about is just early, often, frequent communication. Where are your customers at? I mean, you guys are in Phoenix area. By the way, Phoenix, perfect name for a heat treating company. But so are you more regional? I saw this map on your website. It looks like you have customers all across the country. How do people get a hold of you, and what are the type of people you're looking to work with?
Yeah, we have customers that come from all across the country. We're doing a lot of approval work, so people are moving parts from Connecticut to Arizona or Washington. We get some parts in Mexico that are coming up, and Canada. So really, the best way is to find us online. And I think one thing I just want to highlight, that communication doesn't just start and end at the quote process. At Phoenix, you're going to have access to a portal to look and see live job tracking. You're going to get automated emails when jobs are done and scheduled, so you can follow along. You're never going to be in the dark. It's that level of kind of transparency and communication from the quote process to the end is kind of what we think to set things up for success. And it's just kind of one of those things we go the extra mile. So yeah, you can find us online, phoenix-heat-treating.com. There's a quote page, and we're happy to start the conversation.
That's awesome. I love that transparency of the online portal. I think that's something that you rarely see and is in high demand. So
that's huge. That really sets you guys apart. Well, awesome, Charlie. Thanks for equipping and inspiring the leaders today. Appreciate you being on the segment.
Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it.
Yep.